Hi, here. Hope everyone's having an enjoyable Tuesday evening. I've got another live show with two wonderful guests this evening, James Cathcart and Carl Konado. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Amazing personalities, one of whom I know very little about, but today's session is more because I found it quite fascinating when I went to a workshop recently and I found out about nominating people for awards. And what I found really, really insightful was that not very many young people get nominated. So I wanted this opportunity to speak to James, who's running a campaign to encourage more people to nominate young people for award recognition. And Carl, he will tell you all about himself. So I would love to know who is attending today. Whoever joins us during today's session, you can send us messages via LinkedIn. Please do comment, let us know where you're listening from. And if you're not listening, then you can catch up afterwards. You can find it live on my LinkedIn profile and also the YouTube channel. So I'm going to, without any further delay, bring in our guests. Hi, James.
Good evening. Hello, everybody. Hello, Manwara.
Good evening.
Evening, everyone.
Hi, Carl. It's going to feel a little bit unusual because we actually don't know who's watching or who's listening and not having an audience, but it's more of a conversation. I'd love to know more from yourselves. Who wants to go first? Introduce yourselves, please.
It's only right that James goes first. It's only right.
Thank you, Carl. Well, I'm James Cathcart. I currently run a very small organization, which is me, and a bit of a network of young people and allies called Young Voices Heard. And I'm in the business of promoting young people's voice in public life, whether that's in their communities, local youth councils, right through to the boardroom, and maybe even to influence government policy where possible. And I've worked my whole life with young people in various charities, like the Prince's Trust, and more recently the British Youth Council, which is where I met Carl a few years ago now, Carl, when you were even younger than you are now, because all the trustees at the British Youth Council are under 25. I can't remember how old you were, Carl, when you got elected, maybe 21 or something. I can't remember.
Around that age, yeah.
About 21. So I've known him for a few years. And I still get involved in doing little bits and pieces of voluntary work and projects, helping other organizations, which is where Manwara we met earlier in the year. It seems a long time ago now. And I'll talk a little bit more in a minute about the campaign, but that's a snapshot of me. Born in Northern Ireland and educated in England, and I now live in Kent.
Fabulous. Thank you, James. Paul?
And I feel like it's only because James mentioned where he was born. I feel like it's only right that I do the same. I was actually born in Guy's Hospital, not too far from London Bridge train station. And yeah, my name is Carl Konado, and I am co-founder of a social enterprise called 2 to 3 Degrees, and we deliver personal development training for young people. But the easiest way to explain what we do is by giving a little analogy that says that, you know, a lot of young people leave the education system with the ability to memorize Shakespeare or Pythagoras theorem, not necessarily with the understanding of how to build their confidence, how to do public speaking, and how to network. And we focus on educating the hearts of young people because school focuses a lot on educating the mind. And yeah, like James mentioned, I was privileged enough to do some youth volunteering when I was younger and be a trustee of the British Youth Council, as well as being a chair of the Spirit of 2012 Trust and doing some work with the Safer London Foundation. And I think the kind of common thread across everything that I've done has always been around how do we make sure we're creating an environment to help young people get the best out of the opportunities that are available for them, especially for those young people similar to me who are growing up in backgrounds where there wasn't someone to tell you about what it was like to be a doctor one day. There wasn't any inspirational speakers coming into your school. Your school had more people who got kicked out and suspended for doing bad crimes than it did for people who are potentially going to go to Oxford or Cambridge. And so how do we create advantages and opportunities for young people from those type of backgrounds? That's what I'm passionate about.
And your passion comes through very clearly, Carl. So tell me, how old were you when you started volunteering?
Oh, not to go too deep into the story, but when I was 18, a friend of mine sadly lost his life due to gun crime. Friend of mine from Peckham. And after that happened, a year later, we decided to do something called Rio's Day. And we did a fundraising event where we did a football tournament, and we got loads of people from the local community to kind of bring their gifts for a fundraising event and for a raffle. And we got people to cook food, and we did a whole bunch of stuff, and we raised enough money to buy him a bench and to put it next to his grave at the cemetery. And I think that was like my first taste of how, even though we might sometimes come from negative environments, we can use those negative things to actually do really positive things. Because I'll never forget the feeling that day of the smile and the joy that was brought to Rio's family and all of the friends and all the people in the community, despite the fact that something so bad had happened. And I think it really started from there. And it probably started further back than that, growing up in the church and doing a lot of youth group stuff as well. But that was the real catalyst that helped create more of a change, I guess, in me.
Yeah, sounds like quite a journey, but obviously there was a catalyst, like you said. And what would you say influenced you the most, or who? Is there anybody you would say influenced you during that journey?
Oh, that's a really good question. Who influenced me the most during that journey? I guess there's almost like, I won't say anyone specific, obviously other than my mum. I'm also a twin, so I've got a twin sister, and she's definitely a big influence on me, but I won't say that to her, so hopefully she's not like watching. I don't want to but I come from a single parent household. My mum is just an amazing woman. She had a huge influence on me. But I think there's almost like three sets of people. I've been blessed to always have role models and people in the position to almost like mentor me, even if they didn't actively say, hey, I'm going to mentor you. Even having them at a distance was really beneficial. So although I grew up without a dad, I was blessed to have an uncle who was always like an exceptional role model. And then it was my first football manager. And then you start volunteering and you meet incredible people like James. And I'm not just saying that, but you meet people who are dedicated to doing the work beyond just their job description. So I think from a mentorship perspective, there's loads of people who I've kind of seen, some from a distance and some really close. There's been great friends who have gone on to do great things in different fields. Whether I've got friends who are, I don't know, in graphic design, or friends who work in the finance industry, or even my business partner, Aziz Minot, who's extremely passionate about politics and changing the way young people view politics. I think a lot of that kind of peer mentorship was a real driving force behind me wanting to, do work with young people.
Fantastic. I'm just glad you had such a long list, because when someone asked me that question, I started with young people. I found that a lot of young people inspired me and influenced me. And I don't know, what about you, James? How would you add to this?
Yeah, I think that the kind of passing down, there were people who were my mentors when I was a teenager and when I left college, and I was unemployed for a long time, and I did a lot of voluntary work almost because I couldn't work, so I had to do something with my time. And it was either a youth worker or a community worker. I can remember them to this day. And they seemed to have a belief in me more than I believed in myself. And then as time passed, I began to see what they meant. And as we get older, this idea of you send the elevator back down, or you want to pass it on to other people. And then as you get even older, you see a generation coming through. So the teenagers I used to support are now parents. And you begin to think, this works, this cycle of encouragement. And it's sideways, like Carl was saying, it's peers. But yeah, absolutely. And volunteering and mentoring are two, if we were doing a word cloud, those words would appear. Alongside, the other thing about tonight is the kind of recognition. And maybe recognition isn't just about awards. I think mentors, when they see a younger person with potential, they're recognizing their talent and what they could achieve. It's not a badge or a star, but it is a recognition of what they can achieve. And then recognition awards are then about celebrating it and putting a kind of milestone and saying, well done, look what you've done. But yeah, those were my influences. And of course, internationally, as well as, we know personally mentors, but there are role models in society, in politics and world leaders who have this wisdom and they can rise above the kind of conflict between people and have a bit of statesman-like leadership. I find that very inspiring. It gives me hope in a world that quite often is pushing against hope.
Yeah, I find it really interesting, especially with when you speak to young people and the idea of politics, they don't really see it as a way to make change. Sometimes they don't see themselves. And you're absolutely 100%, there's not enough role models out there, because when I was a youth worker, I was 16, 17 when I started volunteering as a youth worker. There was nobody of my color or my gender in that profession, and I found it a real struggle. The only other Asian Muslim woman that I knew in the youth service, she wasn't really a role model. We hardly saw her. So she just had a title and it didn't feel like youth work. So it was really, really difficult. But Carl, tell us a little bit about your experience, because recognition is so important. And I know as a youth worker, I have put people forward for awards and recognition because I really feel like what James said is so important. Tell me what it was like for you, the experience and what happened.
Yeah, I think so. First off, just to be totally transparent, when I initially got the email through, I thought it was a joke. I actually thought it wasn't real. So I called a couple of my friends that like to play pranks, and I said to them, "Stop messing around. Why are you emailing me and acting to be acting as though you're the government, acting as though you're the cabinet office? Like, stop doing that." And they had no clue. I actually video called them because I wanted to look them in the eye and see if they were joking. And I think
it's so funny.
Yeah, no, it was hilarious because I guess, and this is like said in all humility, I guess if you're really like focusing on doing the work and like almost like really engrossed in the work, you almost don't really think about awards because there's too much work to be done to think about how you can come up for air and think about stuff like awards. So when they come your way, you're a bit like, I was just super humbled. If anything, I was actually a little bit emotional, if I'm being brutally honest, because when I realized that it wasn't a joke, I then thought to myself, that meant that somebody had taken it upon themselves to kind of recognize the work that I was doing. And sometimes you work on things so much and you work so hard that recognition, although you don't do it for that, it just reminds you that you're going in the right direction. And I think that was the key thing for me. It was more just someone giving me a nudge and saying, hey, we see what you're doing, keep going. And that was like the big thing for me, because a lot of the time, and you will know this in both of the work that you do, you sacrifice a lot to really inspire and to support young people. So sometimes when people recognize that, it's like reminding you that your sacrifice hasn't gone to waste, and it is actually bearing fruit. So yeah, there was confusion, there was surprise, and then there was like just a lot of emotion and just real gratitude. Also a little bit of imposter syndrome as well, if I'm brutally honest, especially for the first couple of weeks, especially when the article came out in the BBC. Because then I was a bit like, this just feels weird, because everyone starts contacting you and saying, oh my gosh, I just saw you in the BBC, this is so crazy. And it's interesting because simultaneous to that coming out, recently there's actually a campaign going on in Westminster, and my face is like on a massive billboard as part of an Everyday Kings and Queens campaign. So every day I get like a message from someone saying, hey, I saw your face flying high in the Strand. And again, it just feels like a really weird feeling. But I think the one thing that I can say is that there's a real gratitude and a real almost like excitement, because you know that you're not your name and your face is not just being plastered all over the place because you want to be famous. It's actually being shone based on the purpose behind and the mission of your organization. Because every time someone mentions the fact that, oh, you got a BEM, or they mention, oh, you were in that campaign in the Strand, it gives me an opportunity to talk about 2 to 3 degrees. It gives me an opportunity to talk about how there are so many young people out there that need development in the areas of employment and mental health and building their personal development skills. So it's not necessarily it's not my face that's being shone. It's actually my face is just being used as a vehicle to shine a light on a much bigger issue to do with young people and unemployment and the need to support and serve these young people. So yeah, sorry, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's a bit what it was. All of that confusion and emotion all bottled into one.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's everything you're saying, I'm sure is resonating with a lot of people, and it's so true. We do what we do not because we want an award nomination or anything like that. We do it because we're passionate about it, and I can clearly see that. But also, I think I realized something, James and Carl, during the pandemic, is that we also, if we are a role model out there for others, Carl, if you're representing a young Black man, if I'm representing an Asian Muslim woman, and I'm representing that, and there are lots of young girls or next generation coming after me, I also hold a position of influence. And this is what hit me during the pandemic, because I started talking to a lot more funders, and I realized that funders were struggling to adapt to make sure they were reaching the right people. But organizations can, because historically and culturally, we are a little bit closed and defensive, and we don't really want anyone to know that we're not perfect, even though they actually know we're not perfect. And so we don't always necessarily engage as well with the funders. And I realized that that's what they wanted. They wanted to engage, and I realized I could influence through it. So hence I agreed to be on a panel twice. And I would never have even thought about it. And how important visibility is. Carl, you must do live streaming after today. Now you can see how easy it is. But yeah, so tell me, like, James, what would be really, really interesting is, I know a lot of people that have signed up, whether they're watching or not, I'm not sure. But one thing for certain, they'll want to know the procedure and how easy it is or how difficult it is to nominate someone.
Yeah, and just to be clear, when we're talking about awards, there are loads of different types of awards, community awards, organizational awards. But the one that Carl was talking about that he received, the BEM, is one of the Queen's Awards that's done twice a year for New Year's and birthday. And I think most of us sort of think, oh, isn't it, we hear about people who win them, and we think, I wonder who nominated them, some mysterious committee somewhere. But in the last, I don't know, decade or so, it's any member of the public can nominate another person for an award. And there's no particular age limit on it. You could be a young person nominating an older person for one of these awards. And there's a website with all the details on a form that you fill in and submit. And a little while ago, and this was the workshop you attended, Monwara, they got together, the Cabinet Office is the government department that organises it, in partnership with other departments, and one in particular for community and voluntary sector work and volunteers is DCMS, Department for Culture, Media and Sport. So those two departments and myself did this little live stream workshop with a slideshow, and I put a link in the comments, and we can make sure they appear underneath the post for tonight, so people can go and watch that slideshow. And it not only interviewed people like Carl, there was another young Mete Coban from My Life, My Say, and a young woman called Molly Steers, who set up Molly's Kitchen, an individual doing an act during COVID. But they also interviewed one of the people on the panel who made the decisions about it. and the civil servants who process it. And they were able to give some really helpful advice, I thought, on what they were looking for in a good nomination. And we can talk a little bit more about that and maybe what we can think about whenever we're writing nominations for other people. But it was just that if tonight people want to know more about where are the forms, can they read about other case studies, that we've put that link up for people to go and have a look and explore. They are really trying to make it a lot more accessible. And that particular workshop, because we realized I've been researching the number of young people who get awards, and it's very, very few, maybe 20, 30 a year at the moment, out of hundreds and thousands of members of the public who get Queen's Awards. It's a tiny group. So they're really wanting to encourage more recognition. And I think it's the lesson I learned is that it's not so much that the young people aren't out there. And when I say young, I'm talking about under 30. If you're, it goes down. And actually, you can be, the youngest award was 13 or 14. So it can be quite young to get a national award. But what jumped out at me is the issue was people weren't being nominated. And that my campaign, or why I'm talking about this, is to really encourage people to take a bit of time, look into the detail, and spend a bit of time at the weekend nominating someone. I think I've written down, don't just notice, but nominate. The Cabinet Office say their strap line is, do something amazing and nominate someone amazing. So it's to try and make it a lot more accessible. But that's where a lot of the mechanics, you can find out how to do it, as well as some of those tips.
What do you think, other than the fact that people aren't aware how to nominate, what do any of you guys think might be the biggest barrier to nominations, is, in your opinion?
Well, I suppose that if we're talking about the national awards, it's not realizing that you can. I think when I've spoken to people, they said, "Oh, can we nominate?" Or I thought there was an age limit. I thought it was only chief executives and sort of national figures that are allowed to nominate. So some of it is just about getting the message out there, is that you can do it. The other one is echoing something Carl said, as well as you're sort of being too busy doing the work to be thinking about awards for yourself. I think a lot of us are too busy doing the work to think about recognizing others. Now, as we get into different roles in organizations, we really appreciate what others are doing, but it's making that little psychological jump to turning that into a nomination. Now, I wouldn't want to give the impression that people don't value each other. And I think there are lots of brilliant examples of people being recognized. And I must give a plug, Monwara, to the Waltham Forest Community Hub that you manage for the super little event you did. Can't remember the long title of it, but it was the
Legacy of Kindness.
What was it?
Legacy of Kindness.
The Legacy of Kindness Day, where you were recognizing all the people in the family of Waltham Forest Community Hub, the volunteers, the staff, the members of public, and that kind of recognition, I think, is so special and heartfelt. And it's translating out that a bit, just at different levels in society. I think another barrier is that we think that it's only the old people that get these awards at the end of their career in the civil service or whatever. But I think that is changing now, particularly through COVID, when a lot more people, frontline workers, were getting recognition through the honours system. So it is a little bit about people's attitudes towards the honours system as well, about a reluctance to use it, or it's thought of as something not for people like us, for whatever definition you would want that to be. Which is why I think it's so important that it's almost like we don't need permission to write a nomination, and it's for anyone to both write and be nominated, to change the faces we see and the people that we relate to as role models. I think those other two, I think I mentioned volunteering, mentoring. The other two words I'd want to write up was recognition, but the last one is inclusion. It's there's a fund called Awards for All, if they hadn't already pinched that strap line. I think there is something about this being a vehicle for a bit more balance in recognition. Sorry, I do give very long answers because I get...
No, that's fine, James. We're very similar in that respect. But I'll just jump in whenever.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add one thing just to kind of share a little bit more about what the experience was like. So, yeah, for anyone who's maybe on my social media channels, you would have seen that because of lockdown, although my award was announced in December 2020, the actual ceremony where we were presented with our medals only took place last month. And I was fortunate enough to be able to take my mum. And being that I'm a young black Ghanaian boy who has a mum who, you know, as her only son, I'm her pride and joy. I'm the one she always likes to scream about, shout about. It was a real beautiful moment to take her to Westminster Abbey, have her dress in her Ghanaian attire, turn up at the ceremony and see her son get the award. So I guess from one perspective, for people who are thinking, you know, why is this relevant? Number one, you might be doing some incredible work in your field for young people, for disadvantaged people, for any demographic of people. And sometimes the people closest to you, they understand what they do, but they understand what you do, but they don't necessarily get it. An award is a great way to really bring that message home. And it was a great moment when my mum was able to see the son that she brought up is out in the community doing all of this incredible work. It was a really proud moment for her. The other thing that I think is really important to mention as well is that when we received the awards, they read out every single person's award and why they actually received that award. And that was a really inspirational moment because I then got to hear all of the incredible stories about great things that other people are doing in their community. And it was almost like a reminder in that moment about the importance of living a purpose-filled life. There were people of all different ages, all different demographics, just doing incredible things, people who are answering needs that came as a result of the pandemic, people that had been volunteering since they were children, people that had answered needs that were to do with growing up in a really rural area, so many incredible things. And for me, it was a reminder about the importance of always asking yourself, how can I serve other people? And that's the thing that really inspired me. And so I guess that kind of message is to kind of share that if there's anyone here who's thinking about nominating someone in their community, or who's thinking about, you know, someone you've just been nominated for any type of award, it's just a reminder that the more we allow our lights to shine, the more likely other people are going to feel as though they have permission to do the same. And from hearing all of those stories in that moment at the ceremony, I felt like, wow, I want to do even more. I want to reach even more young people. I want to inspire different types of people. I wonder if I can, because there's needs not just in inner London, there's needs across the world. There's needs everywhere. And so it's like almost continuing to pour fire on that flame that's burning inside each and every single one of us, that purpose flame that wants to do more, that wants to have a reason. And everyone's been through that phase in their life where they've questioned, do I need to chase money or do I need to chase meaning? And sometimes that's just a great way to remind yourself that if you do go for the meaning, everything else will figure itself out. So yeah, I just wanted to share a bit of an insight of what it was like to be a part of that journey.
I love that inspiration you've just given us. We've got a guest, one of my connections. Hi, Soyapa. She's put a message on LinkedIn saying, how beautiful moment for your mum, Carl. So, you know, what you just said, that vicious cycle that James mentioned earlier, I just want to quickly like show that connection. The fact that, you know, like you don't actually do it for any recognition, but when you are given recognition, it's almost like it elevates you. And when it elevates you, you then want to use your power and influence to elevate others. And that's the point maybe that enough people are missing. Because let's be honest, I'm going to be honest. I had no idea you could nominate anyone like who was young. I thought you had to wait for people to be doing things for a lifetime, because I've most of my life seen people nominated that are in their 60s and their 70s, you know. So I had that preconceived idea. And I guess the other thing for me personally is that idea that, you know, you do what you do because you're passionate, and because, I mean, for a Muslim woman, for me, it's part of my spiritualism, you know. And so you don't talk about it, you don't boast about it, you certainly don't expect anything in return for it. Do you see my point? It's very much like what you just said, Carl. So therefore, like, you don't really think about awards or nominations, but I love to give other people recognition. So I have nominated other people for things, but never really realized that you could nominate people so young. So it opened my eyes when I went to the workshop, James, that you were in. And I'm wondering also, because I don't know if you're familiar with the Small Charities Coalition, because they would be a really good way to spread the word, especially amongst grassroots organizations, and just making people aware, because the problem with the DCMS, it's quite far removed. The corporate world is very much, or the public sector is very much removed, and the division is so wide. But we must use our own influence, Carl, people like you and me, to make sure that we are those role models that could encourage others. So I love what you said about, like, using your power to shine, because it's so needed. It's so needed.
And I think one of the things that I'm really passionate about as well, and one of the things that something like this allows me to do, is I was in a school last week, and I'm going to be in a school tomorrow. I was blessed to kind of deliver a motivational assembly to a room full of 130 young boys in year 10, predominantly from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. And as I'm sharing this message with them about what they can do in life, I can also remind them that I was once sat in a similar position to yourself. And you can one day be up here sharing this message with someone else, with a BEM, having done TED Talks, having run a business, but not because I'm there to boast, more so because I'm there to just remind them that even though sometimes you might wake up in the morning, feel inadequate, sometimes you might wake up in the morning and something as simple as not being able to afford the trainers that you want. I mean, I went to school in Peckham, and my whole education system, my whole time in the education system, not once did a speaker or anyone come into my school to say, hey, you could do X, or you could do Y, or you could do this. In fact, we had one person come in, and he was an ex-convict, and he was selling his book. And that's the only kind of external support or advice that we got. But I think part of the reason why I'm so passionate about going in to do it for other young boys now is not just because I didn't have it, but it's more so because if we can increase the cultural capital and understanding of a lot of people from similar communities to ourselves, we can actually help them realize that there is one or two routes for me to actually go and add value to the world. There are so many routes, even getting people from our background to get an understanding of the charity sector, or to get an understanding of different industries that they're not used to. These are the things that really are going to allow us to plant seeds in young people now that's going to bear fruit in years to come. But we've got to kind of have the faith that we need to plant those seeds now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Carl, what's on the horizon for you next?
So much. But don't forget, because I'm really intrigued, Momara, because I took a little spy on your LinkedIn and I saw some of the incredible work that you've been doing. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about that as well. But before I start asking questions, because I realize this is your live, not mine.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Listen, this is a conversation. You ask all you like.
Cool, wicked. It will be great to hear, I guess, from your perspective, what made you decide to go down this route and do the incredible work that you do? And it will also be good to hear that from James's perspective as well, because I think sometimes you are the heroes and heroines that we don't often get to hear your stories about. Everyone wants to hear about the fancy young person who just got a BEM, but actually you've been doing it for years, and you've seen people like myself come and go. So it'll be great to hear from yourself and James what got you started and what keeps the kind of passion burning behind all of volunteering and a passion for young people, and even doing this. You don't have to do this, but you're choosing again to be purpose-filled and to be purpose-focused. So yeah, first, Momara, what gets you going, and what really inspires you to do the work you do?
I like to challenge stereotypes. I like to do what people say I can't do. So for me, my drive comes from being told I can't do it. So when I was young, I decided I wanted to study law. I was told because English was my second language, I'd struggle. And that was my head of English. And so I did everything in my power to prove her wrong. Went on and did a law degree, etc. When I was 17, I started volunteering in a youth club because I came from a, traditional Muslim family where in the old days, a youth club was equivalent to a nightclub. So my father would, and I grew up in a household where my father was like, the main parent, single parent, if you like. He did most of the parenting. So I would never have been allowed to go to a youth club. But I was always quite mischievous, as in came up with ways to go outside the box. So the way I did it was I became a volunteer. And by becoming a volunteer at the age of 17, I got to go to theme parks for the first time in my life. I got to work in a youth club. I went everywhere free. I did all the things I would never been otherwise allowed to do. And then I went on to do lots of other things. But I found that even at that age, I grew up in an area where there were lots of young people like me who had very little opportunity. A lot of young people, a couple of years younger than me, were heroin addicts. They were on crack, cocaine, prostitution was quite sort of rife in my area. And there was racial tension, a lot of racial tension. A white boy who got attacked and stabbed and killed, and then there was a big movement. I don't know if you've heard of, we might not have heard, in Camden, the Richard Everett murder, and it just sparked up a huge thing in my community. And I found that people were knocking on my door, especially the parents who couldn't speak English. So I was accompanying young people that had been injured or something had happened to the police station, at the hospital. And I soon got involved in the local committee, became a committee member. And at a very young age, while I was still at uni, I got nominated as chair. I didn't know what I was doing. You talk about imposter syndrome. I didn't have time to think of imposter syndrome. I didn't even know those words existed. But I had role models, I had people that were mentors, that were silent mentors, and they were men. They were men that really, really supported me. And they said, Munwara, don't worry. We're here and we'll help you. And I guess that's how I got through. And probably that's how I ended up being really driven. And I guess because I went through lived experience, I was a victim of domestic violence myself. You will have read it in my recent post. So I guess I've overcome the fear of not being courageous enough to share that. I feel like I've gone through a moment of liberation, if you like. But so being a victim of domestic violence myself, growing up in a household where my mother suffered from mental health problems, and then over the years having to, like most of the professions that I went into, I was extra cautious about where my background came from because I didn't want to be judged. I was working in youth work, I was working in mental health, so many different environments in Camden, Tower Hamlets. But one thing I remember, I guess it goes back to my childhood, because I was that child that never really lived a child's childhood, if you like. I had already assumed responsibilities at a very, very young age. Maybe because of that, I found it always very easy to engage young people. Always had a very high level of empathy and intuition. So when I would meet young people and other youth workers would struggle to engage, it didn't take me long. And the more I did, the more I realized. And so therefore, I have two children. They're 17 and 22. And sometimes my son would say when he was younger, Mom, how do you know these things? I say, because of the youth work. I'm still young because of the youth work. Keeps me young.
That is so inspirational. I love that, man. That is so, so amazing. I'm so glad that everyone on the live got to hear that as well. James, what about yourself? And I've actually never kind of heard your story or heard what kind of got you involved in the work.
We're in trouble, James.
I know we're being put on the spot. I think it's the beginning of a new TV series by Carl Konado, on the spot, older people. Well, it was in the psychiatrist's chair, But I mean, I do think we often think about what motivates us and where did it start and should we turn right or turn left. But I can relate to some of those early experiences in life coming from a divided community in Northern Ireland. Some people might have picked up my accent. I'm from Northern Ireland. And growing up in Belfast in the 70s, where there was a lot of, and still is a lot of division and distrust between communities, I found it very tough. I joined the International Voluntary Service at 18. And it was the first time I met people from other communities through the common purpose of volunteering. And I was even on teams where people didn't speak English, so it was completely multinational and sign language, but you all knew you were there for a common purpose. So I found through volunteering for a common purpose, and that you could have a multiplier effect that made other people better off than if we didn't do anything. I thought it's kind of purpose driven, and it's better than division. It just felt like a choice. I don't know if people have seen that movie, Train Spotting, and at the end they say choose life. And it was coming from a background where things weren't great and a society that wasn't great and didn't look hopeful, to actually realizing that you can be an agent of change in your own little, initially it's just in the sort of 20 square feet of your influence, or a little village or a small town. And I think as I got older, I realized that you just added on counties and countries and notes on the budget, and the model still works, that you can try and be an agent of change. But there was no plan. I didn't sit down and plan my career out and succeed. It sort of was one thing to another. And sometimes you can't plan. You need to allow for the unexpected. So I don't know if that's I don't know what the question was, but that's the answer. That's the answer you're getting. I need to write the book, but I do feel uncomfortable talking about myself, which is and what motivates me, because we make mistakes too, and I've got things that were maybe a waste of time, as well as some things that were productive. But you learn from everything. I know that this is like full of cliches, isn't it? But there's an element of I used to say to people when I used to talk about the British Youth Council and young youth-led, the power of youth-led leaders of today, not tomorrow. I used to say, and I really believe in this stuff. I used to still do apologize for going on about it, that I genuinely believe in it, as opposed to it's an antidote to the big threat to a lot of youth work, and a lot of what we do is tokenism and ticking boxes, and things there are lots of things just don't get sustained in communities, and the connection isn't always meaningfully made, has to be reinvented. But I really believe in it. I'm a believer, if that makes sense.
I was about to start singing then. But honestly,
the Monkees, 1966 hit.
I think this is maybe one piece of one thing that I noticed a lot over the journey of 2 to 3 degrees in the 6 years that we've been going, is just the value of, one of the things we always say is that success leaves clues. And so part of the reason why I always really enjoy sitting down with people like yourselves is because there are always going to be nuggets of wisdom that I get to leave with. So I'm actually being really selfish right now. I'm just getting you guys to speak so that I can get all of the wisdom. But it's true. I feel like one thing that I've noticed over time is part of the reason why we're also really passionate about working with young people is because it helps open up their eyes to the value of the wisdom that is around them. The problem with being in school is that when you see, the only time you see adults, they're teachers. And you have this huge disdain for teachers because they just feel like authority. So you can't even distinguish between those who are there to add value to you and those who are there to just get you to do your work. You have almost like zero respect for authority. The same way you sometimes look at police when you're a kid, even if they haven't done anything bad, it's like, oh, I'm here to impinge on my freedom. But it becomes this almost like awakening as you start to mature and grow up, where you realize that actually if I'm gonna get the best out of myself, the best way for me to do that is to actually tap into all of the wisdom that is around. And so for 2 to 3 degrees, we've been really blessed for having loads of people around us over time that have just been able to give us advice and point us in the right direction. The reason why we're called 2 to 3 degrees is because that whole idea that 2 to 3 degrees is a really small angle. And so the things that we need for our development are just like small things over time. They say that when a rocket is on its way to the moon, it's actually only ever on target 0.3% of the time. The rest of the time is just spent adjusting. And it's important for young people to understand that, because sometimes they watch YouTube and they think to themselves, how do I become an overnight success? But actually, it's not about becoming an overnight success. It's about being committed, being disciplined, and making small changes over time. And I think that's probably one key that I want to kind of help young people leave with in the work that we do at 2 to 3 degrees.
Excellent. Excellent. And you just touched on something if I have to talk back or go back on my own journey, one thing I didn't do enough of, and I know young people don't do it as well, is we don't ask for help. I've not really asked for help because I've always felt when I was younger, I felt that I had a sense of responsibility. And it was always, you know, in that community where I grew up, you had to fend for yourself. So I was the very few Muslim Asian girls in my area who were streetwise, because I worked with Somalian boys that were 6 foot tall. And I felt like I feared nothing because I had my boys. So, you know, I was 18, 19 years old and I was managing people that were in their 20s. And so I guess it's really in a bizarre way, but now I realize, especially the last few years, I've been asking for more help, and I've been saying, and maybe it's because you get used to thinking that you will find your way. It's a bit like what James said. You know, I do like to plan, but I also find it fascinating to see what comes out, because it's the unexpected outcomes that I find the most fascinating. You can plan and you should have goals, because I say this, I mean, Hamza's actually online at the moment and he will say, Manwara, don't lie, because you're very goal orientated. I am, but I also find it absolutely fascinating when I had no idea and someone comes up with something and it's totally, you know, out of the blue. And I just, you know, I love that. And I feel we don't have enough of that opportunity, and there's not enough. Like I said, most of my learning, my biggest mentors have been my children and people like Hamza. They have been my biggest mentors because I was never I guess I was never tuned that way where I would actually go to someone for help.
Yeah.
So I got my help from the people that I mentored.
I tell you what, though, part of the reason why that's such an important message to share is, even when I think back to 2 to 3 degrees, so we were going for a year. We were just 2 young, crazy people that were like, hey, we want to give all of our energy to the world. What's the best way we can do it? At first, we were like, why don't we write a book? And then we're like, you know what, let's go one step better. Why don't we go into schools and start delivering these workshops? Cool. So we started, and we were both working full time at the time because we both studied international relations and politics. And so when we finished university, we both managed to kind of get roles that we were really passionate about, and we started doing that work. A year after starting 2 to 3 degrees, I remember going to this new job. I had just got a new managerial role, and I walked in on my first day, and all the while the manager was telling me about all of these incredible things that I was going to be doing, I just couldn't help but think to myself, what the hell am I doing here? This makes no sense. I know that there's something that I'm more passionate about there. I know that there's something that I want to be doing. And so literally, I left, I got on a tube, and I came in the next day and I quit. Quit my job, went to do 2 to 3 degrees full time. And it was the stupidest and craziest thing I've ever done. However, we now have a team of 9 people and have worked with over 6,000 young people over the last 5 years. Why am I sharing this? Because you said the point about sometimes the best things that happen to you in life, you can't be trained for. Sometimes the best things that are the place where you create memories, the place where you're going to have storytell, the place where you're really going to have impact is not necessarily going to be the place of convenience. It's not going to be the place of comfort. It's actually going to be the place of the biggest challenge. You know, I had to take like a ridiculous pay cut in order to be able to do this, but it feels so amazing to know that there's so many young people out there that we've impacted. So I guess from this call, who's maybe got an idea or a thing that they want to do that on paper, it doesn't make sense. And if you put it in, if you put the numbers into a spreadsheet, you're like, no, this sum or this calculation doesn't make sense. But actually, life is not always about logic. Life is about creativity. Life is about adventure. And that's where special things really happen. And even as you're sharing your story and as James is sharing his story, that's like the common thread. That's the thing. And that's the thing that keeps people young, if we're being brutally honest. The thing that keeps you young is not necessarily your age. The thing that keeps you young is the freshness of your ideas and also your ability to take risk. Because the only people that actually end up having an impact or changing their community or their world or their school are the people that are willing to go against the grain and do something a little bit different. And I think that's an important message for us to always be sharing, no matter our age or color or class. Take some risks, do something a little bit crazy, because out of that magic, yes, sometimes you're going to fall flat on your face, but that is going to be the best learning. I think I shared a quote with my team today in the group chat, and I said, to succeed at the wrong thing is failure, and to fail at the right thing is success. Because sometimes the most important thing is that you're in the right place, not that you've got the perfect answer. But if you're in the right place and you're going in the right direction, you're much more likely to do something substantial that's going to help someone else. Sorry, I don't mean to go off into a rant, but yeah, just wanted to.
No, it's inspirational, and I think people need to hear it. And I'm just so glad we're having this conversation.
But to get back to the recognition thing, I mean, you can see why I think Carl is such a great role model, inspiring. I know you wanted to hear our stories, Carl, but the whole idea of having a recognition award for me is for people like you and younger who've got on this journey, and for those of us who see that journey is paying dividends, to use the recognition system, whether it's initially Points of Light Award or a Diana Award or nomination for a Queen's Award, is to boost those messages, those role models to other young people, and to get a kind of self-perpetuating circle going, because those messages are so much more valuable and powerful if they've been amplified beyond the local or beyond the organization. What I like about the Queen's Awards, the national ones, is the mainstream media attention. You mentioned, Carl, you were on the BBC. There are loads of other awards that never make it into the kind of establishment and the general discourse of public life. And I think that's why I'm particularly passionate about the most important awards. Having worked for a royal charity, the Prince's Trust, for so many years, and seeing the potential sort of crossover or cut across into the general public that these kind of awards can do. That's why I'm particularly promoting them. But I would urge people to look at the steps on the way, like the excellent Diana Awards or Points of Light and others that people can apply for. Because when you're writing a nomination, being able to tell a bit of the story and to actually link it to, and if they get an award, this story has got a lot more chapters in it that will be amplified if they have recognition. And I think that if people look at the slides I was talking about, they really want to read stories rather than CVs. And I do write some nominations, and I generally start them by saying, I first met Pete or I first met Shelley when, and I literally tell us, and then they end it with, I last saw whoever 2 weeks ago, and it kind of shows I've known this person and that I believe in them, and that an award will make a difference, not just saying thank you to them, but to reach a much faster, bigger audience. And if you can make that connection through what you write in the nomination with the person reading it at the other end, they're not mysterious people. They're very sort of well-meaning judges looking, and they get it, and they want to increase the number of younger role models who will go on and do so much more. as I hope you will, Carl. I was sort of anticipating one day you'll be hosting a TV. You've started now asking us questions. Anyway, Monwara, this is you're the
Carl,
host.
I can guarantee you've got an itch, and it's going to take you somewhere next. I guarantee you, because when I did my first live stream session, I thought I was born to do this. It's just lovely to hear people's stories because of the inspiration. But going back to what James said, I think it's really important to give recognition, because we all talk about, I think all three of us, without a doubt, have this strong desire to want to see change happening. And the only way you can make change happen is by elevating the next generation. Because unless we do whatever is needed to elevate the next generation by recognizing all the good stuff they're doing, things will never change. They'll be the same. When I speak to young people and they say, we want to do this and we want to do that, but we don't get the opportunity. And then my team at the hub, they work on social action and employability opportunities. And we just had a group of young people raising more than £200 for our pensioners group very recently. And these young people walk in, they don't know each other and they lack confidence. And yet, like, you see them 6 weeks later and the transformation is amazing. And I just think these are the same young people that can very easily, with the right support, with the right, recognition, be the ones that actually change our communities. But if they are not supported and recognized at the right time, they don't feel they've been given the opportunities at the right time, there is going to be a feeling of, or a sense of, like, disengagement. And that happens a lot, especially with the young people that struggle, the ones from very, disadvantaged backgrounds, for whom maybe opportunities are quite far removed. And I say this because I know that we work with some communities where there's a lot of cultural issues and lots of barriers that are really, really tough to overcome. So yeah, I really want to see a lot more young people being recognized, and that was the purpose of today's conversation. But Carl, I want to talk more with you now, and I feel like I need to retire and you need to take over.
No, we can co-host. We can co-host together. We'll be the dream team. We'll be the dream team. Just before we just before we kind of sign out, it'll be good to maybe just share a little bit more about some of the upcoming things that 2 to 3 Degrees has got. If I may.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, awesome. So I think I've mentioned already that 2 to 3 Degrees is a social enterprise that works with 14 to 25-year-olds to kind of help them build the employability skills and the personal development skills that are relevant for their future. We're really, really blessed to run some incredible programs like the Mastering the Future program in Westminster, or the Head Start program in Hamburg, where young people go on a journey of taking part in, inspirational workshops where they get to meet with employers like Coca-Cola or Channel 4 or Netflix or Snapchat. Alongside that, they get to access to mentors from industries, and they also get access to work experience as well. That's essentially what the program looks like. The thing that I'm really passionate about is making sure that that young black boy or that young brown girl doesn't walk past some of the incredible buildings in London and assume that they don't belong there. Because I think that's the real thing that we're fighting. We're fighting this idea that because of the postcode or the color of my skin or the council estate that I grew up in, or the fact that I've got free school meals, I don't belong in certain buildings, or I don't belong in certain roles. And that's the thing that we're fighting at 2 to 3 Degrees. So yeah, if there's anyone on here who wants to learn more about how we can really improve opportunities for young people in London, but also around the UK, please do get in touch at 2 to 3 Degrees. We're always really passionate about partnering with the right agencies or organizations that can help us inspire those young people that need it most.
Well, okay, great. What's the best way to contact you then, Carl?
Cool. Hit me up on LinkedIn. It's just Carl Konado. So Carl with a C and Konado is a Konadu. But at 2 to 3 Degrees, we've got all of the social media platforms. So we've got a LinkedIn page. We've got an Instagram page. It's just at the number 2-3 degrees. Twitter, Instagram. I'm the same on Instagram, on Twitter, on LinkedIn. Also, you could just drop us an email. It's carl@2to3degrees.com or info@2to3degrees.com. Literally, we are on every platform, we're even on TikTok. So if you need to get in touch, please do drop us a message. We're just keen and passionate about inspiring young people.
Fantastic, brilliant. And lots of people listening, and I'm sure you will have direct contacts from people either via LinkedIn or your website. And what about you, James? Because obviously this campaign is going to be running for as long as you need it to run. And let's get some young people recognized. Tell us how is the best way to support your campaign? What is the best way?
Well, I've not gone down the route of say sign up to the following list. Oh, my call to action is nominate someone. You don't. It's not a campaign that's saying, can you just repeat the campaign, do the action. Actually, the best way I think you can support what I've been talking about is just to spend a bit of time this weekend thinking about someone and what you could nominate and recognize them for, and do it, and maybe post a connection to the slides that I mentioned earlier, the tips on how to be successful about that. On my website, there's a little resource section, which is just free, not just on how to nominate people for awards. I've actually listed every young person that I could find who's received an award in the last 10 years from the honours list. So you can read about other case studies and what they did and how old they were. And maybe you could add to it if you know anyone that I don't know. But the biggest thing would be to add to it. And also in the business of youth voice recognition, empowerment. Anyway, you can read more about what I do and my services are. But I'm not here particularly to talk about that. But if people want to know more about what I do on the bits of consultancy, they can find me on LinkedIn as well, is that website. But yeah, I call it the Campaign for Youth Recognition. But it's not the traditional campaign with petitions or anything. I don't want to own it. I don't want it to be mine. Nobody owns the idea. Just see if we can amplify the younger generation, which is why I want young people to think you can nominate your peers. It doesn't have to be no rules about who writes the nomination. So
yeah, that's a really important fact because sometimes the rules are in our mind and it doesn't exist.
yeah.
And I found your website extremely resourceful, James. I did do a little snoop a couple of days ago. And I found it really, really helpful. It was really insightful for me. And I would suggest anybody else who wants to know more. There's a lot of information on James's Young Voices Heard website. Check it out. Get in touch with Carl. We've been talking for more than an hour. Can you believe that?
That's crazy how time
Yeah, we're all
flies.
chatterboxes.
Yeah.
We are all chatterboxes. I'm sure we've added value to lots of people who have watched us maybe, and if they haven't, they'll be catching up afterwards. You can actually find it on my LinkedIn profile, but also I've got a YouTube channel. Would you believe it? I didn't know what I was doing. I opened up a YouTube channel so that people could access this because there were lots of people that didn't have a LinkedIn account and they were local people. And I started interviewing local people. So I thought, how do I get this to more people? How do I reach more of the masses? And, it's like what you said, Carl, it's never been about the money. Money will come.
Yeah.
You
So
have a
true.
purpose, money will come. It will find itself. It will find you.
You know what? Okay, last thing before I go. Today, we actually just got news about our first multi-year funding for a project that we're doing. And so just that point that you're saying about money will come, we've been serving young people in this borough for a few years now. And to know that, there's a funder out there that says, I'm looking at the work that you guys are doing. You're doing brilliant work. We want to fund you for the next 2 years. Is an incredible achievement for us, but it's also incredible to know that we're going to have the capacity to keep serving young people. So yeah, I just want to encourage anyone, if you've got an idea, if you've got a thing that you're passionate about, please get out there and do it. No more talking, just do it. And then you can join Momara on one of these lives soon.
Excellent. Thank you. And congratulations on your news, Carl.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank
and
you.
keep up all that good work. And with all of that, did you want to say anything else, James? And I'm going to end our session.
No, just thank you very much for the opportunity and the platform. And I do love your conversational style. I do get nervous with these things, but I prefer this kind of podcast, little chat. It would probably say things that we think, oh, did I say that? And there's people listening. But it's, keep going, Monwar. We really appreciate what you're doing on your little channel. And I shouldn't say little, on the channel. The Chatterbox channel.
You actually pointed out something really interesting, and I'm going to say, when I re-listen to some of these conversations, I feel more inspired, and I feel surprised by what I learn. It's really interesting, but I would highly recommend that you re-listen to this conversation today. And all the best, and thank you. And James, I'll be thinking about who I'm going to nominate this coming weekend.
I love that.
Yeah, and you too, Carl. Are you going to nominate somebody?
Definitely.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Take care. Bye.